There's a lot of new here on the set of Sports Talk Philadelphia. New host, new panel, new crew. Another thing that's new, the Phillies might actually make the playoffs. We got that and much more here on the first episode of Season 23 of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Welcome back. I'm your host, Aidan Tyksinski, and I'm joined on the panel by Mike Hold'em. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm good. Happy birthday to you, too.
Thank you. And then we have Siobhan as well. Siobhan, how are you doing?
I'm good. Happy birthday, Aidan.
Thank you.
21st.
Thank you so much. We're going to jump right into our first team, which is the Philadelphia Eagles. They opened their season in Detroit against the Lions and had a pretty up and down game. They ended up getting out the win, 38-35. The biggest part of that victory was Jalen Hurts. He struggled in a bit to open the game, starting out 0 for 5 for the first time in his career. However, he finished the game 18 for 32, or 18 of 32, for 243 passing yards and 90 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Miles Sanders had a good game as well, finishing with 13 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown. And the biggest impact of the team had to be A.J. Brown, who had 10 receptions for 155 yards, no touchdowns, but he did have a great 55-yard catch that really helped the Eagles turn the game around. I'm going to throw it out to the panel. How do you guys think the Eagles did during this game?
Yeah, I believe, obviously it's week one. There's going to be tons of, it's not going to be pretty. I thought the offense looked pretty good. Hurts, I think all we want from Hurts is kind of improvement this year from him, and I feel like he showed that. I mean, obviously it's week one. There's going to be much more improvement to have, but I think he did that. I thought we ran it way too much with him. 14 rushes, you can't do that over 17 games in a season. But overall, I think for a week one game, I thought the offense looked as good as it could, especially against the Lions. Defense is another story, but we'll get back into that later, I'm sure. But yeah, I'm happy what I saw, and I just hope every week it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is a name that we've heard a lot in preseason, and obviously, a lot of eyes are going to be on him, but the signings that the Eagles have made this season did do well. You mentioned like A.J. Brown and everything, and just getting a win in week one, as close of a win as it was, is still important, so I'm just hoping that'll be good motivation and momentum going into week two.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think that the biggest impact player of this game was A.J. Brown. This is a guy who, with the Titans, got a decent amount of catches, but not as much as you would expect. A lot of that had to do with because of having Derrick Henry on that offense. Ryan Tannehill is also not the best quarterback, but he made an immediate impact with Jalen Hurts. They're well known with each other. They both were very close in high school. Having that connection is important. Do we expect Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown to have a bigger connection going throughout this season?
I think so. I mean, obviously we saw it in week one. He had he finished with 10 catches. I don't know how many targets he had, but he was obviously Hurts' number one guy. So I think that's going to continue all year. And, I mean, we saw what he could do. I mean, he was doing it in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback. I don't know how much of a better he is over Jalen Hurts. But I think A.J. Brown's probably the best receiver they've had. Obviously, they talked this week since Terrell Owens. I think that's probably true. I mean, you've had guys like Deshaun Jackson and then Jeremy Maclin, Jeffrey, but I think he's probably easily the biggest offensive weapon that the Eagles have had since those early mid-2000 teams.
Yeah, and connections are naturally going to build over the season, especially if the Eagles keep winning and keep, up a successful record. That's always going to build team spirit. So I think having that previous connection and then hopefully having the successful season that they're slated for will definitely help deepen those connections in the team.
So the offense definitely played great. The defense was definitely another story. They gave up 181 rushing yards, which is very surprising for them, considering that the Eagles are considered to have the best defensive line in football. They also allowed two late touchdowns in the fourth quarter that made the game a lot closer than it probably should have been. The best play of the game definitely came from James Bradberry, who had 2 tackles, but also a very clutch 27-yard pick six that was on a ball that was tipped by Kazir White. So the defense, like I said, very up and down. They held the Lions to very few points in the second and third quarter, allowed a lot in the fourth, and did allow a lot in the first. Do we expect them to find their footing as the season continues?
Yeah, I mean, it's football season when it's week one and we're already calling for Jonathan Gannon's head. That was terrible. And like last year too, they've had those games where they just look horrible, and it is week 1. They don't play their starters in the preseason. So we'll see how that affects next week against a much better offensive team. And they just could not stop the run at all. DeAndre Swift was just running all over them, and I'm kind of scared next week what Dalvin Cook's going to do. But that D-line's got to step it up, and I think that starts with playing Jordan Davis more because, he just was not playing much. I know he's a rookie, and but he needs to be in there because he's big, he's physical, and I think he could really be a run stopper, and they need to put him in there though.
It would be a Philadelphia team without some questionable defense, but I think it's more or a lot about just keeping that endurance up and being able to play across all 4 quarters and not, slacking off once the 3rd and 4th ones comes around, because obviously when it comes down to the wire like this, that can make all the difference in whether or not you get the win or the loss. So I think definitely stamina and endurance are a big factor as well.
The defense will definitely have to step it up as the season continues. However, the Eagles did get out a win. They're now tied for first place in the NFC East with both the Giants and Commanders, who both won very tight games. Dallas was pretty much the surprise loss and the only team to lose in the NFC East. The Eagles and the Cowboys were considered heavy favorites to win the NFC East. Dak Prescott obviously got hurt in the game. It's very questionable when he's going to return. A lot of reports are saying 6 to 8 weeks. Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner, said he'll be back by week 4. If Dak is out for a while, the Eagles now very heavy favorites to win the NFC East?
Yes, I think so. I think even before the Dak injury, I think the Eagles were favorites before that Dak injury anyway. So I think obviously the injury puts them easily. They're not going to do anything with Cooper Rush, and I think Jerry said that he's not going to go after a quarterback anyway. So I was kind of scared that he was going to go after someone on the Colts named Nick Foles. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but yeah. I think it's still the Eagles' division to lose at this point. The Giants and Commanders are what they are, but I think it's the Eagles' division to lose.
Yeah, Dak Prescott is a huge, huge loss, and I think Jerry Jones saying he'll be back in week 4 is just kind of like an owner trying to be optimistic. I think 6 to 8 weeks is probably the more realistic thing, and every week, if you drop a game, that can be all the difference. That can matter the most. So them not having Dak Prescott for a prolonged period of time, like you said, Mike, it's really their division to lose with that prolonged injury.
Yeah, it's also pretty interesting that the quarterback that arguably had the second best game in the entire division was Carson Wentz for the Commanders, who the Eagles play twice this season. So that could be a very interesting matchup, to say the least. We're finally going to look at the upcoming game the Eagles have. As Mike alluded to, they're playing the Vikings on Monday night. That's going to be their home opener. Kirk Cousins, who is the Vikings quarterback, has really struggled in primetime games. He's 10 for 18 his entire career. However, the Eagles are also going to have to worry about Justin Jefferson, who had 9 catches for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns against what is considered a very tough Packers defense last week. So I'm going to throw it out here. Do we think the Eagles are going to win on Monday?
I'm not totally confident, but I think they have a good chance. Whenever Kirk Cousins is playing in a primetime game, I think that's automatically an advantage. We know, 10 and 18 in primetime games, but the 2 guys are Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, especially Jefferson. Everybody kind of thought Chase would take over as that number 1 receiver, but I think it's probably going to be Jefferson, and he's already getting the respect around the league. So you just have to watch out for those 2 guys, especially Jefferson, with the way they played last week. They can't do that again this week.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a close game, and hopefully we will see the improvements that we're calling for. And obviously with the home opener, you want them to win. So hopefully that can factor into their performance as well, having the home fans behind them. It's the home opener. People are going to show out. It's going to be loud. So, hopefully that and the improvements that we want to see will be seen and maybe squeak out another win.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I think the Vikings are going to take this one. I just have too much confidence in their offense. That's all we have for Eagles talk. We're now going to go into another team that is having a very successful run in the Philadelphia Phillies. This wasn't really the case for most of the beginning of the season. Up before June 3rd, when Joe Girardi was still the coach for the Phillies, their record was 22-29. He then gets fired. They bring in Rob Thompson, who's not really well known. He was the Yankees bench coach. No experience coaching a major league team. The Phillies have completely turned around since then. They're 58-33 under Thompson's managerial career with the Phillies. How do you think Thompson has made such a change for the Phillies?
You probably heard me when I talked about it earlier in class, but I think just they want to play for him, and it seemed like with Girardi, they just did not want to. They weren't, motivated, and they just did not want to play for him. Same thing with Kapler. They were just an average team with them. But it seems like with Thompson, he just really elevated all of them, and it's kind of given me flashbacks of little like 2017 Eagles, kind of the next man up mentality, and that's kind of what they've been doing. I mean, Bailey Falter has filled in for Zach Wheeler phenomenally. I mean, his control is awesome, but I think Thompson is just a big reason for that. I think the players just want to play for him, and they got to take that interim tag off him. I think he should be the guy next year and years to come for the Phils.
Yeah, Gabe Kapler and Joe Girardi, in my opinion, always seemed a little out of place in the clubhouse, and Philly Rob. He really has integrated into the city, which is important. He's like Mike said, a guy that the team wants to play for, and that can't be overstated and how important that is. And it seems like they just really want to make that playoff push, and they lost out on it the last 11 years, and I think they're getting as tired of it as we as fans are. And so I think with the city behind them, with the manager they want to play for, with the great performances that they're putting in, it's just a forward push and a lot of motivation to do well and hopefully get a playoff spot this season.
Yeah, not only did the Phillies make a huge change to the Mirziello position, but during the trade deadline, they did something that they haven't done in a while and actually traded for players that made a difference. The biggest player was probably Noah Syndergaard, who's from the Angels. He's 4-1 with a 4.61 ERA in his 7 starts with the Phillies. He also got Brandon Marsh in a separate trade with the Angels, who's batting .263 with 2 home runs, 10 RBIs. These aren't blockbuster trades, but they definitely improved the Phillies. I'm going to throw this out to the panel. How important was it, first of all, to make trades like this at the deadline? And yes, there was some impact, but do you think that it pushed the Phillies above where they were before the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Syndergaard deal, I don't think has had a huge impact. I mean, just because I think he's shot. I don't think he's got anything left in his arm, to be honest with you. But the Brandon Marsh deal, I think he could easily be our center fielder, probably our starting center fielder next season. I mean, the defense that he brings, I mean, just in this Marlins series, he's made some great plays in center field. And he's got a little bit of a bat, too. That's a little improvement, but he's still young. So, but I do like the Marsh deal, and then the Syndergaard deal was good then. It just really hasn't worked out, but, you know, it was the same deal. So, but I do like Marsh, and I think he will be probably the starting center fielder next season.
We definitely got the most hair in the trade deadline.
100%.
Love that Brandon Marsh is kind of Jason Worth 2.0 in that sense, but his defense has been great. Like you said, Mike, Noah Syndergaard hasn't, you know, kind of burst onto the scene like we wanted him to, but the fact that our pitching has still kind of been able to keep up the energy and keep up the results is such a huge turnaround from where they used to be, where our pitching was just abysmal, especially the bullpen. So, you know, while it hasn't incredibly set the world on fire, it's put them in a good position. And you know, Brandon Marsh, like you said, he's still young. He still has time to develop. He has a lot of good leaders and good personalities in the clubhouse to foster that and just, you know, foster the team in general to make the push over the line into the playoffs.
Yeah, so Siobhan just alluded to, the Phillies are in a great position to make the playoffs for the first time since 2011. They're currently 80-62, which is 2.5 games over the Padres. For the second wildcard spot, they have a great lead over the Brewers, 4 games over the Brewers. They have 20 games left in the regular season. How confident are you guys that the Phillies can finally make it to the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident that they have one of the wild card positions locked up unless they just really fall off. But I think I know the division might seem a little out of hand right now, but when we started in 2007, the Mets blew I think it was an 8-game lead with 17 games left. And they're I think they just got swept by the Cubs. So, and they have 7 games against the Braves, who are, I think, a game out from first in the NL East. So I wouldn't put that out of the question either. But I think when it just comes to playoffs, I think hopefully, not jinxing anything, that they will make the playoffs. But I'm feeling pretty good about their chances.
Yeah, they definitely are in a really good position, and I think they'd really have to mess things up to blow it now. And you know, it's the hope that kills you, and you want to be cautious about that. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being confident in this team, because that confidence is a huge part of their performance as well. And they're winning, they're playing really well. So I think they'd really have to try to mess it up where they are right now.
Yeah, it was fun talking about 2 good teams. So now we're going to go to the teams that have been a bit more disappointing. We're going to go now to the Sixers, who unfortunately lost their playoff series to the Miami Heat, 4-2 back in the spring. When you look at the statistics for the guys that stepped up, they really didn't in the playoffs. Joel Embiid averaged 23.5 points, 10.7 rebounds per game, which was fine, but not really what you would expect from him. James Harden averaged 40% field goal and 36% from three. So these two guys that we were expecting to really do a lot for us to push us to the conference finals didn't really step up. Who was the more disappointing guy in the playoff series for the Sixers?
Obviously, you don't want to put the whole team on Joel Embiid's back, but he's the Sixers guy. And, you can't expect him to do everything, but that was a disappointing performance for him, especially when he does have such a great track record in the regular season, and he's established himself as a leader and someone who kind of can do it on, especially with James Harden as well. It's just not the performance that you expect from either of them, especially in such a huge playoff series.
Yeah, I mean, the whole team I was disappointed with. I don't know why Doc Rivers is still even the head coach. No. But probably if I could pick one, it would probably be Harden. But obviously all of them kind of just did not do really much of anything. But I think just what James Harden is, I mean, we know what he is, one of the best scorers ever. I think they just need a version of the 2018 or that Houston James Harden, just like not the full version, but just like a shell of that. And I think they'll be much better shape this season.
Yeah, so the other part about that playoff series, especially the Heat series, it was right after Embiid had hurt his finger. He was out for a lot of games against Toronto. Didn't really look like himself afterwards, but it's been a huge question mark in Embiid's career. Is he going to be able to last through a playoff series or even a full playoffs while healthy? Can the Sixers rely on anyone else at this point to keep Embiid healthy enough to get through the playoffs?
Now, I don't know if there's one guy in the team that could fill that role. I mean, I guess the next best thing would be James Harden, but even then it's like Joel Embiid has such big shoes to fill, and he's such a huge presence in the team on the court. So right now, I don't see any one specific person being able to step up and replace him if he does get hurt again.
Yeah, I mean, I think James too, but also I think it's how big of a step Tyrese takes this year. Because we saw him take steps last year, but I think if he really elevates this year, maybe all-star level, I think that will at least take some of the pressure off of Embiid and Harden as well in the scoring department.
Yeah, for people that don't remember, Tyrese Maxey has a lot of fans on the show. He got a much bigger fan of me when he decided to go out to the Phillies outfield in the middle of the regular season game when all the announcers were out there, and had a great conversation with them. I personally love Maxey's energy. I agree. I think that's a big part of it. But, I mean, Embiid is like that guy, and you really need him to stay healthy. Luckily, the Sixers did make a few additions to the team, especially in the center position. They recently signed Montrezl Harrell to a 2-year, $5.2 million contract, and also signed P.J. Tucker to a 3-year, $3.2 million contract. How important were these signings to add to the bench, especially because the bench struggled so much in the playoffs?
I think they were huge. I mean, you might have overpaid a little bit for P.J. Tucker, but I think physicality was one of the biggest issues for the Sixers. And I think P.J. Tucker and Montrezl Harrell are the perfect, counter to that. And they will bring that toughness, that Philly toughness that I think this team needs. And you got Harrell on a good deal. Tucker for $11 million a year is a little expensive for his age, but I do like the signing, so I'm happy with them.
And depth on the bench is always a good thing to have, especially since the Sixers struggle with it so much, like you said, Aidan. And having that edge, that toughness, that grit that we love to quote Philly teams on so much, it's always good to have players that are largely positive and will add a good bench presence in case they ever are needed to step up in any games.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for correcting me. It is a 3-year, $33.2 million deal for Tucker. So, but when you look at the Tucker deal, the other issue is now the Sixers are getting looked into tampering because of that. Do we think that anything's actually going to come out of the NBA looking to this investigation for the tampering with Tucker?
I doubt it. I mean, it seems like they always are trying to get Morey for something. I mean, I don't think so. And even if they do, it'll probably be, a fine? Yeah. It won't be anything crazy, but... yeah, we'll see. I don't think anything's big going to come out of it, though.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at most tampering deals, it's not usually that big, but it will put another target on the Sixers back, one that's really there because of Embiid. So I'm interested to see how that happens. We're now going to go into the Flyers, who have been even more disappointing than the Sixers. They finished last in the Metropolitan last year. They just didn't look good. They haven't really signed anyone in the offseason. And their new coach, John Torella, who they were announced in the middle of the offseason to be that coach, didn't have a lot of positive things to say about the team. He said that he wouldn't announce a captain at this point, and also said that he had a lot of concerns about the Flyers' culture, mainly when it came to the leadership position. So is anyone feeling that positive about that the Flyers can turn things around from last year to this year?
That kind of statement from the coach before he's even coached a game, not really. I mean, I understand those are valid concerns, and especially when you have a Claude Giroux-shaped hole to fill and captain, like, there's no one on the team that can fill that to the fullest extent. But, you know, just to see that the coach doesn't even seem to have that much belief in this team right now, how are we supposed to? You know, we haven't made any big signings. We've signed some young guys to contracts. I don't think it was necessarily all the right ones that we should have brought on. So it's just, it's a big mess right now. A lot of guys are aging a lot. Some don't have a lot of years left on their contracts or even too many. Like, it's a lot to figure out. And so for this season, I don't see them, you know, all of a sudden magically getting their ish together and, you know, turning around a last place finish like last season.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I don't think they're going to do much. I mean, it's pretty bad when the coach in his first year, he comes in the locker room, is already saying how bad, you know, the culture was. So that's kind of concerning. I'm happy we at least have some good teams here in Philly.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they turn it on because I'm a fan of his, but we'll see how he can change that culture.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. It was very shocking for me to read comments like that, especially from, like Siobhan said, a brand new coach just entering the locker room. And yeah, you don't have Giroux anymore, so you really are looking for someone to fill that center position or captain position. And I just don't know. Does anyone think that he's going to name a captain this year?
I think he should, because as a first-year coach, I think it's really valuable to have a captain who has been there, who knows the club, who knows the culture. Even if you don't like it, this captain knows it better than you. He can work with you and help you get acclimated into the team. So to not name one, it's like just because you don't have one doesn't mean that, you know, Sean Couturier or Scott Lawn aren't going to step up in that role anyway.
It will be a very interesting season for the Flyers. We're now going to go into everyone's favorite segment, Fast Five. We're going to start with Siobhan on the Philadelphia Union.
So if you are not already a fan of the Union and following them, you are really missing out because they're number one ranked in MLS. They're the number one ranked MLS team in the world. They already clinched their playoff spot. They're in the lead for the Supporters' Shield. Jim Curtin is, in my opinion, probably the best head coach in Philadelphia right now. It's really amazing to see that with all this success, the Union are getting more of a fan base, they are getting more recognition, but they just need to be appreciated so much more because consistently they're doing better than every other team in Philadelphia. And I know they play in Chester, but they should still be considered one of the big Philadelphia teams because they're doing so well. They almost won the MLS Cup last year. If we had a fully healthy team against NYCFC, we would have, but I digress. It's really amazing to see them go from this fledgling little team in 2010 to being the giant that they are now because soccer culture is growing so much in the U.S. We're hosting the World Cup in 2026. Philly has a game for that. So to have such a great homegrown fan base and to see the Union just doing so well and doing so well consistently, the fact that they could get even more silverware than they had before, you know, it's just, they're on the uptick so much. They have great youngsters that they're producing, you know, guys that get into the national team that play in Europe. It's such an amazing thing to see. And I'm just really excited to see them in the playoffs because I have full confidence that this can be the year that they win it all. And, you know, as someone who's been a fan from the very beginning, it's just a really amazing journey to see them on.
The Union are definitely a team that we will follow a lot more on this show. Now I'm going to go to Mike for his World Series favorite.
Yeah, I think the clear answer here is the Dodgers. If you just look at I think they won their 100th game last night. I mean, their roster is just loaded. But I think a dark horse that is not really a favorite, but I think is gaining more attention is definitely the Cardinals. I think they could, if I would bet, I would probably put a bet on the Cardinals because I think they could. I think they have the roster to make a run in the playoffs, and I'm hoping the Phillies can, but we'll see. But, yeah.
Yeah. Siobhan, do you have a World Series favorite as well?
I mean, I'd have to agree with the Dodgers being in there. It's their 9th NL West title in 10 years. They have such a great roster. They have a great coach. Everyone believes, everyone wants to go there. So I don't see any team really being able to beat everything that they've done this season.
Yeah, so there was also a lot of surprising victories in Week 1. Mike, I want to go with you. Who was the most surprising team that you saw in Week 1 in the NFL so far?
Yeah, I think the biggest upset for me was probably the Giants beating the Titans. Just because, I mean, the Giants aren't expected to do much this year, kind of like the past since they won the Super Bowl. But I think just them beating the Titans, I think Barkley having a big game is huge for them. And I think that will go a long way for them. I mean, obviously, I hope not because we're Eagles fans. But, yeah, I think the Giants beating the Titans is definitely my upset of the week.
Yeah, I thought that was a really big game as well. I was very surprised that Tennessee did not play that well. And the fact that even with all Daniel Jones' mistakes, that the Giants were able to come out with a victory was huge. I also thought the Steelers beating the Bengals was pretty big. The fact they got 7 sacks on Joe Burrow, even with Watt hurt, was pretty surprising to me. I thought that was a great victory for them. I also want to go now to NFL MVP very early predictions. For that, Mike, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think it's just pretty easy right now. I think Mahomes, I mean, 5 touchdowns. I mean, we know what Mahomes can do, but losing Tyreek Hill and still throwing 5 touchdowns is just remarkable, and I think he's probably going to run away with it. I know it's Week 1, but we'll see. Yeah. If he stays healthy and everything, I think he will be the favorite.
All right, I was going to go Mahomes as well, but I'll go with someone else. Just for the sake of argument, I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson. Huge Week 1, like I said, 9 receptions, 184 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Kevin O'Connell, who's now the Vikings head coach, was the Rams offensive coordinator. We all saw what he did with the Rams last year, getting them to the Super Bowl, winning them the Super Bowl. Cooper Kupp had an amazing year, won the Triple Crown for receiving. I think that Justin Jefferson can probably do that as well. The 9 catches was a little bit too less, but I think he'll get a lot more. I think also as Kirk Cousins gets more established with his offense, he'll be looking for Jefferson a lot more as well. So I think either one of them right now, it's pretty open for who could win MVP. The last topic we're going to go with is the best conference in college football. I'm going to cover that one. I'm going to go with the Sun Belt, a.k.a. the Fun Belt, because this conference has been exciting. Week 1, Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech. Old Dominion has had 2 wins over Power 5 conference teams. Both of those wins have been against Virginia Tech. So pretty shocking there. Appalachian State, you need to watch them. First of all, Week 1, they lost an absolute shootout with North Carolina, losing 63-61. There was multiple times where they were down by 2 touchdowns, ended up coming back to almost winning the game, almost tying it. But then they did beat number 6, Texas A&M, which was just a huge one, won it completely differently. So this is a very fun conference to watch. You've also got Georgia Southern beating Nebraska, which ended Scott Frost's career at Nebraska. So this conference is just very exciting to watch, and this is just non-conference play, so conference play will be very exciting. We are now, that was it for Sports Talk Philadelphia. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that you follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram with Sports Talk LT, or Sports Talk L, I forget the name of the socials, but we'll find them eventually and bring them up. Thank you so much for watching, and everyone have a great night. Oh, well.